The prisoner's nightmare begins. Commander Xyra slowly opened her eyes. Her head was spinning and her body ached, as if she had been thrown around like a ragdoll. The cold metal floor beneath her sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to move, but her wrists and ankles were bound by glowing energy restraints. The faint hum of a spaceship's engine filled the air. She was a prisoner. Xyra's heart pounded as she looked around. She was inside a containment cell, the walls smooth and metallic, with no windows. A dim red light flickered overhead. The air smelled sterile, artificial, and lifeless. Where am I? Who captured me? Her last memory was of her mission, an important one. She had been gathering intelligence for her people when suddenly an ambush happened. A sharp pain on the back of her neck told her she had been hit with a stun weapon. But by whom? Sarah struggled against the restraints, but they only tightened. A robotic voice echoed through the cell. Prisoner awake. Remain still. She clenched her teeth. She wasn't going to remain still. She needed to escape. Before she could plan anything, the sound of heavy footsteps approached. The metal door slid open with a hiss, and two towering figures entered. They weren't of her species. Their armor was black, their faces hidden behind sleek helmets with glowing blue visors. Mercenaries. One of them tapped a device on his wrist. Xyra's restraints deactivated, but before she could make a move, the other mercenary pointed a weapon at her chest. Move, he ordered. Xyra knew better than to fight now. She needed to understand the situation first. Taking a deep breath, she stood up and walked out of the cell. The mercenaries led her down a long metallic hallway. The air was cold, the walls covered in strange markings. Every step she took echoed loudly. Other cells lined the corridor. Inside them, she caught glimpses of different alien prisoners, some terrified, others unconscious. Who were these people? Where were they all being taken? As they reached a larger chamber, Xyra saw something that made her blood turn to ice. A massive screen on the wall displayed their destination. Her breath caught in her throat. Earth. Her muscles tensed as fear crept into her mind. Earth, the most feared planet in the galaxy. She had only heard stories, and none of them ended well. The galaxy was vast, filled with thousands of intelligent species. Some were warlike, some peaceful, but all of them shared one common belief: never go to Earth. It wasn't just because humans were strong. No, it was because they were survivors. Every alien force that had tried to invade Earth had disappeared. Some were wiped out in battle, others simply vanished without a trace. The few who returned spoke of horrors, humans who fought with impossible strategies, who never surrendered, who adapted to anything. Xyra's mind raced. Why are we going to Earth? Are we being sold? Used as test subjects? Executed? She turned to the mercenaries, her voice steady but demanding. Why are we going to Earth? Neither of them answered. A third figure entered, a tall alien with 4 arms, wearing a long dark robe. His red eyes glowed as he observed her with amusement. The mighty Xyra, he said, his voice like a hiss. I expected more fight from you. She recognized him instantly. General Rakor, a known warlord who worked for the highest bidder. Xyra narrowed her eyes. What do you want? Rakor smirked. Not me, but my client does. He gestured toward the screen, where Earth's blue and green surface became clearer as they approached. You're all being delivered, he continued. Humans-like. Entertainment. Her stomach dropped. Entertainment. Rakor leaned in slightly, his sharp teeth visible. You see, the humans don't just fight wars. They test their enemies. They enjoy watching them struggle. Xyra's fists clenched. If that was true, then she and the other prisoners were nothing but prey in some cruel game. The spaceship shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere. A voice over the intercom spoke in a robotic tone. Prepare for descent. Entering drop zone in 5 minutes. Rakor gave her one last smile before stepping back. Good luck, Commander. You'll need it. The mercenaries grabbed her arms and forced her into a separate chamber. A large metal pod stood in the center, its doors open, waiting. Her mind raced for a solution. Think, Zaira. Think. But before she could resist, she was shoved inside. The doors sealed shut. A countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The pod ejected, and Sarah felt herself plummeting toward Earth, toward the most dangerous planet in the universe. She had no idea what awaited her down there. But one thing was clear. She had to survive. The descent into the unknown. The pod hurtled through Earth's atmosphere, shaking violently as flames licked the exterior. Inside, Commander Xyra struggled against the restraints holding her in place. The G-forces pressed her back into the seat, making it difficult to breathe. Red warning lights flashed inside the cramped space, and the metal walls groaned under the pressure. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Earth, the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, and she was about to crash land on it. A mechanical voice echoed through the pod. Impact in 30 seconds. Brace for landing. Zyra's fingers curled into fists. She wasn't going to die here. She refused. The pod spun as it entered the lower atmosphere, thick clouds obscuring her vision through the reinforced window. She caught glimpses of the landscape below, dense forests, jagged mountains, and vast bodies of water stretching toward the horizon. The sight was breathtaking, almost beautiful. But she knew better. Beneath that beauty lurked something terrifying. Humans. Every species in the galaxy feared them. Not because they were the strongest, not because they had the most advanced technology, but because they were the most adaptable. They never surrendered. They never gave up. The few alien races that had attempted to conquer Earth had vanished, and now she was being thrown into the heart of their world. Impact in 10 seconds. Sarah clenched her teeth and braced herself. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The pod slammed into the ground with a deafening crash. The impact sent a jolt through her body, knocking the breath from her lungs. The metal walls groaned as the pod skidded across the earth, tearing through trees and rocks before finally coming to a stop. For a moment, there was silence. Then, everything erupted into chaos. The pod's emergency systems activated, flooding the interior with dim green lights. Zyra gasped for air, her heart pounding in her chest. She unbuckled herself, wincing at the sharp pain in her ribs. The crash had left her bruised but alive. She had survived the fall. Now she had to survive Earth. The first signs of danger. With a hiss, the pod's doors slid open. A wave of fresh, humid air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp soil and vegetation. Zyra hesitated for only a second before stepping out onto the uneven ground. She was in the middle of a dense jungle. Towering trees loomed over her, their thick canopies blocking most of the sunlight. Strange sounds echoed through the air, distant growls, rustling leaves, the call of unseen creatures. She wasn't alone. Zyra's instincts screamed at her to move. Standing still in an unknown environment was a death sentence. She quickly scanned her surroundings, noting the thick foliage and natural cover. She needed to find high ground, somewhere she could assess her situation. As she took a cautious step forward, her foot sank into the damp earth. She looked down. Tracks. Not hers, and definitely not alien. Her pulse quickened. Something, or someone, had been here recently. The hunters arrive. A sharp snap echoed through the jungle. Zyra spun around, her muscles tensed. Something was watching her. The silence was unnatural. The creatures in the jungle had stopped making noise. That only meant one thing. A predator was near. Then she saw it. A shadow moved between the trees, too fast for her to get a clear look. Then another, and another. They were circling her. Humans. She had read reports about their hunting tactics. They didn't attack head-on. They stalked, studied, and struck when their prey least expected it. Zyra's fingers twitched toward her belt, But her weapons had been stripped from her before she was thrown into the pod. She was unarmed. A low voice echoed through the jungle. "She's alive. That makes it interesting." Zyra's blood ran cold. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light. They wore rugged, patchwork armor, their faces concealed behind dark visors. Their weapons, primitive but deadly, were drawn. They weren't soldiers. They were hunters. And she was the prey. One of them, taller than the rest, tilted his head as he observed her. Not bad. Most don't survive the crash. Zyra remained silent, her mind working rapidly. She needed a plan. The leader took a step closer. "Welcome to Earth. If you want to keep breathing, you'd better start running." Zyra's muscles coiled. She didn't need to be told twice. With a burst of speed, she turned and ran into the jungle, the hunter's laughter echoing behind her. The hunt had begun. Crash landing and first encounter. Zyra's heart pounded as she sprinted through the dense jungle, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The humid air clung to her skin, making every step feel heavier. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, covered in thick roots and damp soil. Branches whipped against her face, but she didn't stop. She could hear them behind her. The hunters were close. Their movements were silent, almost ghost-like, but Zyra knew they were there, watching, tracking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She had read about human hunting tactics before. They didn't rely on brute strength like other species. They calculated, adapted, and exploited weaknesses. They didn't chase their prey recklessly. They guided them into traps. Zyra clenched her teeth. She wasn't going to be caught. Her lungs burned as she pushed forward, weaving through the jungle's thick vegetation. She needed to find cover, an advantage, something. Then suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath her feet. The fall into darkness. Zyra barely had time to react before she was falling. She tumbled down a steep slope, her body crashing against jagged rocks and twisted vines. The world spun around her as she plunged into the unknown. Then, impact. Her back slammed against solid ground, and a cloud of dust erupted around her. She groaned in pain, her limbs aching from the brutal fall. For a moment, she lay still, struggling to catch her breath. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Above, the hunters stood at the edge of the cliff, their figures silhouetted against the dim light filtering through the trees. One of them knelt, peering down at her. "She's still alive," he said, his voice carrying an unsettling amusement. The leader stepped forward, adjusting the crude but deadly rifle slung over his shoulder. "Doesn't matter. She won't be for long." Zyra's pulse quickened. She had to move. Now. Ignoring the pain, she pushed herself up and ran deeper into the cavernous landscape she had fallen into. The air was cooler here, the walls damp and covered in moss. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, and the distant sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels. She had no idea where she was, but at least for now, she was out of their sight. The discovery. Zyra moved cautiously, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. She needed a weapon. Without one, she was defenseless against the humans. As she crept through the tunnel, something caught her attention, a faint glow emanating from the far end of the cavern. She approached carefully, her instincts on high alert. And then she saw it. Wreckage. An old alien spacecraft, partially buried in the rocky walls. It was ancient, the metal rusted and covered in vines. Symbols of an unknown species were etched onto its hull. Zyra's heart pounded with renewed hope. If there was a ship, there might be supplies, weapons, a way off this planet. She hurried toward the wreckage, her fingers brushing against the cold metal as she searched for an entrance. A partially collapsed doorway revealed a dark interior. She squeezed through the gap, coughing as dust swirled around her. Inside, the ship was silent. The walls were lined with broken consoles, their screens flickering weakly. Wires dangled from the ceiling, sparking occasionally. The air smelled stale, untouched for years. Zyra moved deeper inside, scanning for anything useful. Then she found it. A weapon rack. Most of the firearms were damaged beyond repair, but one caught her eye. A sleek, compact plasma pistol. It looked old but intact. She grabbed it, checking its charge. Half power. Not great, but better than nothing. She turned to leave. And froze. Something was watching her. The unexpected ally. A low growl echoed through the chamber. Zyra's grip on the pistol tightened as she slowly turned. A figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't human. It was an alien. Tall and gaunt, its skin a dark shade of blue, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The creature's body was wrapped in tattered armor, and deep scars covered its face. Zyra raised her pistol, her heart racing. Friend or foe? The alien raised a hand, palm open, a universal sign of peace. You are not one of them, it said, its voice raspy. Zyra narrowed her eyes. One of who? The alien glanced toward the entrance of the wreckage, its expression grim. The hunters. Zyra's breath caught in her throat. You've seen them. The alien nodded. I've survived them. She stared at him, realization dawning. This wasn't the first time the humans had done this. This planet was a hunting ground, and she wasn't the only one trapped in it. The truth about Earth. Zyra lowered her weapon slightly, studying the alien before her. He looked weak, malnourished, yet there was a fire in his eyes, a survivor's fire. She drove her knee into his ribs, throwing him off. Then she grabbed a fallen weapon and ran. She didn't look back. Something worse than the hunters was coming, and she wasn't going to stick around to find out what it was. Into the jungle. Zyra sprinted through the dense foliage, branches scratching against her skin. She needed to put distance between herself and the hunters. The alien survivor was already moving, keeping up despite his injuries. You should have left me, he muttered. Zyra shot him a glare. Not my style. Suddenly, a loud crash behind them shook the ground. They turned just in time to see a monstrous shape emerge from the trees, a beast unlike anything Zyra had ever seen. It stood over 3 meters tall, covered in thick, spiked hide. Its eyes glowed red, and its jaws were lined with razor-sharp teeth. It was a genetic nightmare, a fusion of creatures from different worlds, something engineered to hunt. Zyra's stomach twisted. The humans weren't the only predators here. The monster's gaze locked onto them. Then it charged. Zyra had no choice. She raised her stolen weapon and fired. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. The truth about Earth. Zyra barely had time to react before the monstrous beast lunged. Its massive claws tore through the jungle, ripping apart trees as it barreled toward her and the alien survivor. There was no time to think, only to act. She dove to the side just as the creature's jagged teeth snapped inches from her shoulder. The ground trembled under its weight, sending vibrations up her spine. The alien survivor, his name still unknown, rolled to the opposite side, gasping for breath. Run, he managed, voice hoarse. Zyra clenched her stolen weapon. No, we fight. The beast roared, shaking the very air around them. Its eyes burned a deep, unnatural red. This wasn't just an earthborn predator. This was something engineered. The human's darkest secret. Zyra aimed and fired. The plasma blast struck the beast's thick hide, but instead of burning through, it barely left a mark. She cursed under her breath. That should have done more damage. The alien grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a tree just as the creature swung its massive tail, snapping through the jungle like a whip. It won't work, he said, his breath ragged. They made it that way. Zyra's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The alien wiped blood from his forehead. The humans, they don't just hunt their enemies here. He pointed at the beast, which was sniffing the air, searching for them. They make things like that to hunt for them. Zyra's stomach twisted. You're saying they, what? Create monsters. The alien's face darkened. Not just monsters. Tests. They breed and modify creatures from across the galaxy, make them stronger, smarter, deadlier. Then they set them loose. He gestured toward their surroundings. And they watch. Zyra's mind reeled. She had thought Earth was just a prison, a place where humans threw their enemies to suffer. But now she understood. This wasn't a prison. It was an experiment. The jungle wasn't just a battlefield. It was a controlled environment, a living lab where humans pushed the limits of survival, testing their enemies, testing their creations, seeing what lived and what didn't. And worst of all, the humans were always watching. The hidden observer. Kyra exhaled sharply, scanning the trees. There has to be a way out. The alien hesitated before speaking. There is one. She turned sharply. What? He looked up toward the canopy. They have a station, a facility, hidden beyond the mountains. It's where they observe everything. Zyra frowned. How do you know that? He hesitated. Because I saw it. Zyra narrowed her eyes. Then why are you still here? The alien's expression hardened. Because I never made it inside. He lifted his arm, revealing deep scars running along his skin, branding marks. They caught me before I could reach it. The others, they weren't so lucky. Zyra inhaled sharply. She had known the humans were strategic, calculating, ruthless, but this was something else. This was deliberate cruelty. They don't just test aliens, the survivor continued. They test their own kind too. Zyra froze. What? The alien nodded grimly. Not all humans are part of this. Some are prisoners, criminals, traitors, even their own soldiers who disobey orders. They throw them in here too. He exhaled. And if they survive, well, the humans learn something new. Zyra clenched her jaw. This was worse than she had imagined. This wasn't just about survival. This was about understanding war on a level no other species dared to. No more running. A deep snarl brought them back to reality. The creature was still hunting them. Zyra gritted her teeth. No more running. We kill it, she said. The alien looked at her like she was insane. That thing is bred to be unstoppable. How do you plan on killing it? Zyra's eyes flickered toward the jungle canopy. We don't fight it head-on. She lifted her stolen rifle, then looked at the landscape around them. We set a trap. The alien exhaled. If we fail, we won't. He stared at her for a long moment, then finally nodded. All right, he said. Let's kill this thing. The ambush. They moved quickly, gathering supplies from the wreckage and fallen soldiers. The jungle had resources, and Zyra knew how to use them. The plan was simple: lure the creature into a dead end, use the wreckage as a weapon, and bury it alive. It was risky. It was reckless. It was human. They set the final piece, an unstable energy core from the wreckage, primed to explode. Then they ran. The beast roared as it spotted them, its massive form tearing through the jungle. Right where they wanted it. Zyra and the alien dove into the crevice just as the creature followed, right as the wreckage collapsed from above. The explosion shook the jungle. Dust and smoke filled the air. Zyra coughed, blinking through the haze. The monster let out a final, guttural snarl before the rubble silenced it forever. They had won. But Zyra knew this was just the beginning. She turned to the alien, eyes burning with new determination. You said there's a facility. He nodded, still catching his breath. Zyra clenched her fists. Then that's where we're going. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to end this. And make the humans pay. The final challenge. The jungle was silent in the aftermath of the explosion. The air was thick with dust, and the charred scent of burning wreckage clung to everything. Zyra wiped the grime from her face, her body aching from the intense battle. The alien survivor, still catching his breath, leaned against a broken tree trunk. They had won. The engineered beast was dead. But Xyra knew the real fight was just beginning. She turned to her companion. The facility. How far is it? The alien exhaled sharply. Beyond the mountains. It'll take a day, maybe two. Xyra's fingers tightened around her stolen weapon. They didn't have 2 days. The explosion would have drawn attention. If the humans were watching. And she knew they were. Then they would be coming soon. She looked up toward the towering cliffs in the distance. The facility was their only way out. It was where the humans controlled everything. If they could get inside, maybe they could find a way to end this twisted game. Or at the very least, escape it. The approach. Xyra and the alien moved quickly, keeping to the shadows as they made their way toward the mountains. The jungle gradually thinned, giving way to rocky terrain. The climb would be dangerous, but there was no other way. As they ascended, Xyra's mind raced. What would they find at the facility? Was it a military base, a research station, or something worse, a gladiator arena where humans studied their prey up close? She didn't know, but she was about to find out. Hours passed, the sun dipping below the horizon. Night fell over Earth, but it wasn't a comforting darkness. It was an unnatural silence, one that felt watched. Xyra had spent her life on dangerous worlds, but Earth was different. It wasn't just a place of violence. It was a trap. The first signs of the final test. Halfway up the mountain pass, Xyra spotted something unusual. Lights. Artificial, glowing faintly in the distance. She crouched low, signaling the alien to stop. "We're close," she whispered. The lights flickered, then moved. Xyra's breath caught. They weren't lights. They were drones. She barely had time to react before the air erupted with a sharp mechanical whine. A swarm of sleek, hovering machines descended from the cliffs, scanning the terrain with glowing red sensors. The alien cursed. "They found us." Xyra raised her weapon, but the drones weren't attacking. They were hurting them. "Move," she shouted. They ran. The drones followed, their lights cutting through the darkness like piercing eyes. Xyra could hear something else beyond them. Helicopters. The humans were coming. Captured. They didn't make it far. A thunderous boom echoed through the valley, and the ground collapsed beneath them. Xyra barely had time to scream as she and the alien were swallowed by the mountain itself, falling into darkness. She hit the ground hard. Pain flared through her body, her vision swimming. Then she saw them. The humans. Armed soldiers surrounded them, their faces obscured by armored helmets. Their weapons glowed with energy, aimed directly at her head. A tall figure stepped forward, his posture relaxed, but commanding. His face was unmasked, a rare sight among humans. His expression was calm, his eyes unreadable. "Welcome to the final test," he said. Xyra gritted her teeth. She wasn't going to let them break her. The commander smirked. "I like your spirit." He turned slightly, addressing his soldiers. "Take them inside." Xyra and the alien were hauled to their feet, their hands bound in energy cuffs. The facility loomed ahead, a massive structure built into the mountain itself. And inside, the truth about Earth. The arena. Xyra had expected a prison. She had expected laboratories, torture chambers, maybe even an execution hall. She hadn't expected this. The humans led them into a coliseum. A massive circular chamber stretched before them. Towering walls lined with massive viewing platforms. Humans, scientists, officers, spectators, watched from behind reinforced glass. In the center, a combat pit. Bloodstains covered the floor. Bones, alien and human alike, littered the ground. Xyra clenched her fists. This wasn't an experiment. It was a game. A voice boomed through the speakers. 2 new contestants. The crowd murmured with interest. Some humans leaned forward, taking notes. Others watched with amusement. Xyra's captor, the human commander, smiled at her. "You want to leave Earth? Then win. Her restraints clicked open. The alien survivor was freed as well. The opposite gate slammed open. Tyra turned, her breath catching. A creature emerged, a hybrid beast with cybernetic enhancements, its muscles rippling with unnatural power. It was a fusion of war species, designed to be the perfect predator. The crowd cheered. The commander stepped back. "Kill it, and you get to walk out of here." Sarah took a slow breath. This wasn't just a fight. This was a message. The humans didn't just study war. They perfected it. And now, they wanted to see if she was worthy of surviving it. She locked eyes with the alien survivor beside her. "We do this together," she said. He nodded grimly. The beast roared. The final challenge had begun. The greatest escape. The beast's roar echoed through the Colosseum, shaking the ground beneath Cyrus' feet. The crowd of humans above watched in silence, waiting, observing, studying. Zyra's grip tightened around the blade she had stolen from one of the fallen guards. It was crude compared to the advanced weapons she had used in the past, but it would have to do. Beside her, the alien survivor, his name still unknown, breathed heavily, his eyes locked on the monstrous hybrid before them. "We need a plan," he muttered. Zyra exhaled. "We don't have time for one." The creature, a nightmare of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancements, lunged. Zyra barely managed to roll aside as massive claws slashed through the air where her head had been moments ago. The beast's cybernetic enhancements whirred as it adjusted its stance, its eyes glowing in eerie blue. This thing wasn't just a predator. It was a machine of war. And the humans wanted to see how she would survive against it. The fight for freedom. Zyra and the alien moved in opposite directions, flanking the beast. It didn't hesitate. It went straight for Tyra. She raised her blade just as the creature swiped at her again. The impact sent her skidding across the blood-stained ground. Pain exploded through her ribs, but she forced herself to move. The alien used the distraction to attack from behind, slashing at the beast's exposed joints. Sparks flew as his blade met metal, but the creature barely flinched. Instead, it whipped around with terrifying speed, catching him off guard. Zyra's eyes widened. It was learning. The human's true experiment. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a test. Not for the beast. For her. She wasn't just fighting a monster. She was proving something to the humans. She had read the stories. Earth had been invaded countless times. And every time, the invaders either died or disappeared. Now she understood why. The humans didn't just defeat their enemies. They studied them. They adapted. They improved. And now, they were watching her, seeing if she was worthy of survival. Zyra gritted her teeth. She would show them. Turning the tide. The beast charged again, but this time, Tyra was ready. She dodged at the last second, using its own momentum against it. The creature slammed into the arena wall, momentarily stunned. The alien didn't hesitate. He leaped onto its back, driving his blade into the exposed section near its cybernetic spine. The beast let out a mechanical snarl, thrashing wildly. Zyra saw her chance. She grabbed a fallen guard's plasma rifle, aimed for the creature's eye, and fired. The blast hit directly, sending the beast reeling. Its cybernetics sparked violently, circuits overloading. It staggered, snarled, then collapsed. The arena fell silent. The moment of judgment. Zyra turned to the observation deck, breathing hard. The human commander stood there, watching her. His expression was unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. The arena gates opened. Guards stepped forward, but they didn't raise their weapons. Instead, they escorted Zyra and the alien toward an exit. She narrowed her eyes. What game were they playing now? The truth about Earth's survivors. The commander met them outside, his arms crossed. Impressive. Zyra scowled. What is this? What do you want? The commander smiled faintly. What do I want? The same thing every human wants, to see who's worthy. She clenched her fists. You treat this like a game. His smile didn't fade. Because it is. He gestured toward the facility. You were never meant to escape. You were meant to adapt. Zyra's breath caught. What? The commander's voice was calm, almost amused. You think Earth is a death trap? A prison? It's not. He took a slow step forward. It's a recruitment center. The ultimate choice. Zyra stared at him. You. Recruit the people you hunt. The commander nodded. We don't waste talent. Those who survive, truly survive, have something special, a will to fight, a mind that learns. He gestured around them. That's why no one ever escapes Earth, because the ones who prove themselves. He smiled. They join us. Zyra's mind reeled. Every story she had ever heard about Earth, the missing invaders, the ones who never returned, they hadn't died. They had become part of humanity's war machine. The commander tilted his head. So, what will it be, Zyra? She glanced at the alien beside her. He was just as stunned. They had come here expecting to be prisoners, to be hunted. Instead, they were being offered something else entirely. A chance to join the very species that had been feared across the stars. The final decision. Zyra exhaled. The humans were playing a game, and she had just won. She looked up at the commander, her expression hard. I don't join without knowing the rules. The commander chuckled. That's the best part. He extended his hand. There are none. Zyra hesitated. Then, slowly, she took it. The humans had tested her. Now, it was time to see what they could teach her. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning.